Hello, thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, for my Sagittarius Lunar Eclipse deep dive video. As ever, I'm going to explore the event of the lunation itself, but also by sharing the chart wheel to explore what else is going on around this in terms of the other planetary interactions, because this is a backdrop that's going to last for the next 6 months. I'm then going to explore the forecast for each of the 12 zodiac signs. Please stay with me for that. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. And if you'd like to know more about more serious astrology and ascend above your zodiac sign, please check out my wonderful special offer package of a 12-month forecast and a character analysis based on your time, date and place of birth, totally unique to you, which will give you searing insights into your potential in the time to come. Please see the link below for more. So on the screen you can see the event, and the sun is at 5 degrees 25 minutes, and on the other side of the heavens there is that eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius. So what is Sagittarius moon energy about? I think freedom is one of the notable things, and also being a lover of truth, because the sign of Sagittarius is the higher philosophical part of the zodiacal journey. It's very much to do with history, it can be to do with law, and it can be to do with international boundaries and travel. But the moon in this location can make us very much truth seekers. But if we look at the ascendant on this event, it's actually in the very precise sign of Virgo. And the ascendant is exactly in a square, not just with the sun, of course, with also the position of the moon too. So what we have, if you look on the other side of the wheel, we have the descendant, and that's in the sign of Pisces, very close to Jupiter, and also the part of fortune. So what this particular event manifests is a grand mutable cross. Now, mutability is the mode that influences the sign of Gemini, the sign of Sagittarius where the moon is, and also of the ascendant in Virgo, and also the descendant in Pisces, which remember is very close to the part of fortune and Jupiter. So when we have a grand cross, we have 4 quadrants that are all in some way or another competing with one another. And that is something to take very much into account. But if we look at the position of the moon, it's actually in the 4th house. And the 4th house is very moon-like, because the 4th house, in terms of the overall zodiacal journey, rules or governs the sign of Cancer. So the moon's in the right location in the 4th house. It's asking us to be earthed down, but it's also asking us to be free. So we don't want to be confined wherever we're living over the next 6 months with these influences. But the more meticulous energies of the ascendant in Virgo are all also asking us to be very focused on those details. Whereas Sagittarius energy, quite honestly, is much less concerned with details and much more concerned with the big picture. So we need to feel that there is a sense of liberty in terms of our home situation, or that we can actually go about our lives in a much more fluid way, which is what mutability really represents. And I think after the COVID restrictions, that's something that we can all really relate to. But you can see not just the sun is at the top of this chart, very close to the 10th house. We also have the North Node in Gemini still, which is going to go on until early next year. But the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, is right alongside Venus, but they're all in the 10th house. And I think that suggests for all of us, we want to link to the wider world in a much more vivacious and playful way, because that's the sun, that's the energy that comes from the sign of Gemini. But actually there may be another part of us which has learned such huge lessons about what we need as human beings in terms of this lockdown, that being at home at times can actually be very good for us, as long as we have the feeling, it could be even the illusion with mutable energy of being able to do as we please in our home environment. And I think what this last 12 or 14 months has really taught us is that actually the home is a very precious place, and that's why so many people have been moving or improving their home situations, because they realize just what value it brings to their lives. You can also see that Jupiter is actually T-squaring the Sun and the Moon position, and obviously is in opposition to the ascendant. What Jupiter does, particularly in the sign of Pisces, is give us a sense of optimism, a sense of the big picture, obviously for its rulership of Sagittarius. But I think also it can see us pushing back against any kind of restriction. So I think generally, particularly with the planet of rebellion, Uranus in the 9th house, which is very much about freedom, but squaring up to Saturn in the 6th house of obligations, means that we could be quite resentful of going back straight into slogging away at our jobs. I think getting out and about and mixing and mingling, and then retreating back to our homes where we can have that personal space and freedom, is going to be a big part of the pattern over the next 6 months. You can also see that Mars in its full in the sign of Cancer is in the very sociable 11th house, but it is broadly in opposition with Pluto in the 5th house. I think if anyone does try to, if there is kind of any attempt to reimpose many restrictions, I think it will be very difficult for a lot of people to accept, especially if you're living in a country which has had a successful lockdown or vaccination program, which has seen the rate of the infection really drop down. Because when Mars and Pluto are in the mix, that gives us an awful lot of willpower. And across the 11th and 5th houses, we're really not going to want to be ordered around very much, and we'll be very determined to do as we please. So I think generally what this eclipse is saying to us over the next 6 months is that the truth of our emotional relationships, that's the 9th house. Sagittarius people can also be very truthful, obviously in terms of how they see the reality of a situation. And of course, as they would say in therapy, we're all entitled to our own truth and our own reality. But certainly Sagittarius energy is asking us to be authentic about how we feel about our emotional lives. We may want to retreat into that personal space, but there's going to be a big desire to get out and play with all that Gemini energy, interact, mix and mingle, to spend time socializing. It's going to be so wonderful. But that Virgo energy is also saying, look, we need to also be practical. We need to look after our bodies. We need to have a degree of moderation. But Jupiter in the mix is saying, I don't care about the moderation. I just want everything big, large, vivid, because it's been so tough. We just need to feel that we can be free-spirited and playful as much as possible over this next half year. Now, I would just say one other aspect that I haven't mentioned is that Neptune is squaring up with Mercury. So when it comes to everybody's professional situations, with Mercury in the 10th, which is about responsibilities, obligations, and our goals and ambitions, squaring up with Neptune in the 7th, I think there could be some transitionary changes going on in how we all work. And everybody may be trying to find out what the actual pattern is that works best for us all. And that can create a degree of confusion and uncertainty at times. But I think that's pretty well it. We've got 4 quadrants that all want to be doing their own thing. That Virgo ascendant wants us to be disciplined, meticulous. The Sagittarius moon wants us to be free, but also at times having moments of quiet introspection. Jupiter, very close to the descendant, wants to connect with people and have lots of hugs and interaction. And then the Sun, and also that cluster of energy, the stellium in Gemini, is saying, whoa, let's go and party. And all those 4 areas are going to be competing in in the next 6 months, I feel, and we've got to try and find a way to pick through it. I think there's one thing that can really help us, and that is that the North Node on this particular event is in a very stable link with Saturn. So once we've all had a little bit of a kind of thrash out in terms of revising and reminding us of our love of socializing, that's going to help us to get a bit more grounded, and with Saturn in the 6th house, to settle down and get a bit more productive. Because obviously earning money, going about our lives and making the economy develop in a positive way, again, is good for all of us in general. So now please stay with me for your forecast for each of the zodiac signs. Now for you, Aries, the challenge for you over the next 6 months is very much about your ideas. And your ideas, I think, are going to be pretty fluid. And that's good, because that suggests that you can be much more suggestive to looking at new ways of doing things. And I think you could have some quite fascinating discussions over the next months to come. And I think the key for all of us with all this mutability is not to get too hung up on staying with one particular theme or way of being. Just go with the flow. Now for Taurus, I think your financial situation may require some self-discipline. I mean, few signs have such an appreciation of good food and good wine as yourself, but then few signs would have such a great appreciation of homegrown vegetables, stuff you do in your own allotment or backyard, or even making food from scratch, or even foraging if that's your thing. It just depends on the type of Taurus energy that you personally manifest. But keeping a balance between what you need to indulge and enjoy in the here and now, and how that impacts on your cash flow down the line, is really the secret of this particular lunation. Now for you, Gemini, really this is the time for you to really go for it in terms of your individuality. And the moon on the opposite side of the heavens is just saying that somebody close to you may be a bit pushed out if you are very focused on your goals and ambitions. But there's every chance with Jupiter now in a really prominent part of your situation that you can go through a more successful period with your work. But just be aware, with your ruler being compromised by Neptune, you only have a certain amount of energy. There are only a certain amount of minutes, hours in the day, and therefore it's important to prioritize so you're not spreading yourself too thinly and then you feel absolutely exhausted. So there's a lot to go for, but your energy can still be a little delicate. Now, for you, Cancer, I do feel that this is a fascinating lunation, because it points towards a need to tune into both the physical and also emotional side of your well-being. Now that's not to say you're not already, but take even greater care around these areas. There's conversations to be had with this Virgo ascendant, and Jupiter in your 9th house really gives you a desire to be much more open-minded perhaps, or even travel more, or connect to people who perhaps can give you some good ideas, even advice. But I think with Mercury in your 12th house squaring up with Neptune, anxieties could just get rather larger if you don't keep a real sense of perspective. So it is going to be important not to oxygenate any kind of more negative or fearful strands that may be unfolding in your life. That's not to say that you should ignore them. This cluster of energy in Gemini is saying really embrace them. So if you don't feel 100% energized, don't just see it as being a physical dimension, see it as being an emotional and spiritual one too. And the spiritual dimension is one that many of us ignore, because in the Western world particularly, that's not the way generally we have been educated to develop our reality. But if you are feeling underpowered, it's a brilliant opportunity for you to review lots of things in lots of different ways. And even if you improve your diet by 10%, do a little gentle exercise, say 5% more than you are doing now. Look very carefully at if you could do any supplementation that might be very helpful to you. Are there some, perhaps, the odd treat that you give yourself that's not perhaps so good for yourself? Are you giving yourself moments of peace and tranquility? If you make changes 5-10% here and there, suddenly 50%, 60% difference can emerge. And this is a wonderful lunation for you to become a lot more virtuous in all sorts of ways. And it can be a real period of growth, that's for sure. Now, for you, Leo, it is very much about sociability. And because you can be so charismatic, getting together with people does give you a big boost generally. And I think the challenge for you over the next 6 months is just keeping all of the people happy all of the time, which we all know can often be quite a thankless task. So you need to pick and choose. And I think in terms of financial prospects over this next half year, I wouldn't be tempted to get into a get-rich-quick scheme with friends or anything like that. I don't think that's going to be so good for you. But getting together with friends, you may be surprised actually that someone from your past comes quite powerfully back into your thinking, if not actually into your actual situation. But the gathering of energy in Gemini is very much about your future. The gathering of energy in the sign of Sagittarius in the guise of the moon is very much about how you actualize your talents and achieve joy from your future. So it's about integrating those two areas to make it work better for you. Now, Virgo, this chart is all about success, and there's a lot of success that you can gain. The trick is going to be in ensuring that the goals and ambitions that you're developing actually feel good, that you feel comfortable in whatever position you put yourself into. But if you're wanting to reach for the stars and be much more go-getting and set your sights high, the next half year gives you a great opportunity to do it. It just means, however, with your ruler Mercury compromised by Neptune, that the links you have with other people are clear, are reliable, and give you a sense of security. If you're linking with people that you're not quite sure of, that can be a problem. Now, Libra, the cluster of energy that's in the sign of Gemini is very much about discovery. It's about adventure. It's about independence. If you feel really hemmed in your situation at the moment, this is pushing you to have lots of conversation and to mix and mingle with people who stimulate your mind. If your companions at the moment just are not switching you on in this way, then it is time to try to seek out new interests, new hobbies, or new activities which do give you that mental stimulation. Scorpio, well, the cluster of energy in Gemini is very redolent of the basic energy of your sign. It's about evolution. It's about a sense of transformation. So having the moon in your second house is just saying to you, how can you transform things but at the same time feel secure financially? Great question. So you know that this is very, very important. But with Saturn and Uranus still in a square across your 4th and 7th house, if finances are anything to do with an issue around a close relationship, or I have to say even intimacy, this can be a time of a lot of soul searching, and you may feel a little bit conflicted in some ways, but all you can do is just keep working things through, especially with Mercury and Venus so closely together, because this could be a time when someone new comes into your world who is quite a magical, has a magical impact upon you. But in the current relationship that's a bit stuck around those areas, I think it may feel that you are having to clarify your choices and that you only have a certain amount of time to do that. And I think you'd be absolutely spot on if that was your view. Sagittarius, for you, with the moon in your sign, it's all about relationships. If you're not feeling satisfied in a relationship at the moment, you're going to have to address that over this next half year. But if you want to forge a relationship, or you want to improve a relationship that's going well, it's all to go for. What does it mean having your ruler Jupiter squaring up the moon and also the sun? I think it does mean that you could sort of like enlarge the downside at times, but also I think it can give greater grist to that part of your nature that can be so bubbly and jolly. So whatever you're dealing with, whether it's moving into a relationship or moving out of one, generosity of spirit can be a great gift that you can use extremely well. Capricorn, for you, the gathering of energy in the sign of Gemini is very practical, but having the moon in your 12th house is very spiritual and psychological. If you're making big physical, practical, organizational changes in your world, don't forget to take that emotional, spiritual, and more subconscious energies with you. So in other words, don't just live purely in the pragmatic, practical side of your nature. You have to embrace your vulnerabilities too during this time. It is, of course, the case that Saturn, your ruler, is in your 2nd house, and it is squaring up with the north. Saturn is squaring up with Uranus in your 5th house of pleasures and risk. I don't think this is a great time to be too flighty with money, to be honest. But if you're wanting to transform your life in some kind of radical way and the circumstances aren't really allowing it, or you feel fearful, or you feel a bit trapped in the current situation, it could be very frustrating for you. What I would say is try to find someone that you can talk to who's honest with you about and understands where you're coming from with your practicalities, but knows you well enough, but also understands you well enough to actually give you some insights around your more emotional needs. Don't deny those. I think that's really the reality of this particular event. Now, Aquarius for you is a glorious set of energies in your personal or solar 5th house, which is very much to do with going out there, demonstrating to people how much fun you can be, how playful you can be. So if you have found the lockdown very, very difficult, this is going to be enormously reviving for you. But with the moon in your 11th house of your principles, your idealism, that's giving you the answer straight away. It's not the amount of friends you have, it's the quality. You know this, you're an Aquarius. Aquarius people have a sense of truth-seeking, and that's because your ruler, Uranus, is all about truth. But of course, Uranus is squaring Saturn, your other co-regent, a more traditional ruler, which is in your sign. So if there is something about your home, neighbourhood or family circumstances which prevent you from going out and having fun, I think it could frustrate you a lot. The moon's asking you to set a sight on a future which is really rewarding, but the square between Saturn and Uranus may seem that whichever way you go, there is some kind of gotcha or down. Yes, life's like that, isn't it? It's very rarely or 100% a gain. Sometimes we have to give something up to get something. But if you want to entertain people with the force of your personality, the next 6 months you can do it in spades. Which brings us to Pisces. Now, Pisces for you, the gathering of energy with the sun and the stellium in Gemini is all about your home, emotion and family. But the moon's very high in the sky. And even if you're quite a private Pisces person, because Jupiter in your sign and your ruler are or is in a T-square with both the sun, the moon, but also in opposition with the midpoint and the ascendant of this particular chart, I kind of feel that this particular part of your year does require you to make some big decisions. Jupiter is about big decisions, some big calls. And it may not be easy to feel that you're going to necessarily get everything that you need. So what can you do? I think wherever wherever your work is needs to give you the emotional nourishment. And if that's not happening, I think that can make you dissatisfied. But whatever you do, because Jupiter and Neptune are in your sign, whatever pivot you take, there is definitely going to be some kind of reaction from that pivot with this particular chart. Unfortunately, quadrant charts or grand cross charts are like that. I have one in my nativity. Whichever way I go, there is some way that life will bite me on the bum, because that's what quadrant charts do, because we've got some kind of competing element. So on one part of it, the ascendant of this chart in Virgo is asking you to think about relationships along with the midpoint, but then you've got all that energy in your fourth house which is saying, yeah, but I need to feel secure. And then there's another part of your nature, but I need to have the job that feeds my need for recognition and success. But then that brings you back to Jupiter. So the only way you can crack this equation, really, I feel, particularly with your other ruler, Neptune, squaring up with Mercury in your fourth house, which is, you know, it does mean that you're going to be very sensitive, I think, over the next 6 months. You're going to have to make some big decisions here. And those big decisions may be beneficial or be aided if you talk to someone who really has got a big view of life and can help you to see that whatever you do will have some ramifications. I don't think it's going to move for you without there being some other counterpoint of energy that develops from that. But Jupiter's saying take big decisions. Don't avoid things through timidity. I don't think that's going to work for you. It's just going to feed a sense of resentment and feeling locked in and frustrated, particularly with Saturn in your 12th house squaring up with Uranus. That can create a lot of nervous tension. So some big decisions are required from you over the next 6 months. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye.